Welcome into a new edition of the Going Deep Buffalo podcast on the Built in Buffalo podcast network. I'm Kevin Massare here with Kevin Siracuse to go over live schedule news. We obviously have a pretty close leak going on right now, so we can break that down a little bit, as well as kind of when the schedule actually drops. We'll kind of break down some of our thoughts and games we're looking forward to, some things we see already on the schedule, and more. But as always, this show is brought to you by the Summit Center, some of the best autism care in Western New York.
And tonight's show is also brought to you by Dave Dengler and the Larson-Timko Funeral Home in Fredonia. Larson-Timko Funeral Home offering 100% fully guaranteed price and pre-arranged funeral plans with live streaming available. You can give them a call at 679-9000 or visit their website at larsontimkofuneralhome.com.
There you have it. Well, thank you so much, everybody, and to our sponsors as well. Kevin, first and foremost, how you feeling on schedule release day?
I feel pretty good. I will say I'm not into it as much as everyone else is. I think a lot of that has to do with my work schedule now that the draft is over. So I was out working all day and I haven't been able to really dive into it like we're going to tonight. But I've been listening to some stuff, especially on the radio, and I know like a lot of people are into this. So I'm looking forward to getting into it. As you know, we've seen plenty of leaks and the official schedule comes out in about 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the schedule's fairly leaked. Minus some times, like we don't overly have the times at the current moment for every single game. But I think the primetime games are leaked, the order of which they play them, the bye, things like that. There's maybe a few final discrepancies, but potentially at least there's something to talk about, a framework to talk about. This the schedule officially released at 8 p.m. I'm assuming each team will tweet out their schedule, or I don't know if they're doing that 2-hour breakdown where you have to wait for your team. I don't know how the NFL is going to play this, but we have the leak for the most part, and let's kind of take a look at what it looks like. And we'll bring it up on the screen for you right now, Kevin. It looks like a home opener against Arizona, presumably at 1 p.m. into a Miami Thursday night football game, Monday Jacksonville Monday night football at home, into a Baltimore Sunday night football. So Houston on the road, the Jets on Monday night football again. So 4 out of 6 to start with on primetime. Like, I mean, if this schedule holds to be true, which by all accounts it will be, what are your initial reactions to some of the things we've seen, the way that this starts to play out?
I think personally, it looks like a very favorable schedule. I love that it looks like they're going to be opening up at home against Arizona at 1 p.m. I don't think that they would make them play any later with that short turnaround going to Miami on Thursday. So I love 1 p.m. games. There's nothing like the home opener in Orchard Park when it's 80 and sunny. And, not to go on a tangent, but that's one of my favorite memories. I don't know if you remember the 2011 home opener. That was against the Oakland Raiders when they were down, I believe, 24 points at the half. Ryan Fitzpatrick led that comeback and had, I don't know if it was a walk-off touchdown, but it was a game-winning touchdown to David Nelson. And it, just like the aesthetic of the crowd and the sun. And it was just such a great day. So when we were talking about this and everyone's been making their predictions, I was like, Arizona makes a lot of sense because I feel like the NFL typically wants to send those Western teams over to the East, in this case, in Buffalo, for those week 1 openers. So if this is true, I love that the Cardinals would be playing in Buffalo at 1 o'clock, and then talk about a couple of really fun weeks at Miami for Thursday night football, and then you turn around to host Gabe Davis and Mitch Morse for Monday night football, and then you go to Baltimore for Sunday night football, and then you go to Houston to play Stephon Diggs, and then, we might as well just keep on going. Week 6 at Aaron Rodgers and the Jets for Monday night football. So, I mean, those first 6 weeks are going to be something.
From predictions of going 0-5, I would bet that won't be true. But anyways, if you look at kind of the breakdown of how this goes, I think there's a real soft spot there before the bye, before the KC game, really, KC at home. I guess it toughens up a little bit, KC, then the bye into San Fran on Sunday night football, Rams, Detroit. That is a hard landing spot for the Bills. But then they end with New England, Jets, New England. I mean, week 16 and 18 against New England. I guess there's some back and forth. Which one's going to be home? Which one's going to be the road? One a little bit there, but doesn't really matter. How does that make you feel to end with New England Jets in New England, Kevin? Like that ending, which could be pretty huge. 3 division games. You won't even know your division record. Yeah, I mean, those games will be pretty important.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see if this holds up once it comes out in about 12 minutes now, because I don't know how I feel about finishing with the Patriots 2 times in 3 weeks. Because on one side, I can see it where it's like, okay, the Patriots will probably be done by then. They'll probably be in evaluation mode and there won't be much going on. But then on the other side, you say, what if Drake May is playing really well and New
Yeah.
England is just always annoying? Like, I was thinking today, what happened in New England last year? And I couldn't think. I was like, wait a sec. They really lost to Mac Jones last year in New England. I believe that was in October. So you never know with the Patriots. And I know they've had a big turnaround here, but I would almost want the Patriots earlier in the season, because if you get Drake May in a raucous Orchard Park, like let's just say it's actually the Patriots week 1 instead of the Cardinals, I think I would sign up for that, because if you want Drake May to make his NFL debut and you have 80,000 screaming drunk fans, that definitely helps the Bills. But who knows? We'll see when it officially comes out.
Talk about Arizona that to start off the season and into Miami, on the road with no sun. So Miami fans are probably going to be pretty upset that the Bills get to miss out on the sun again, so that they can't totally bake out one side of the field, which is completely unfair to begin with. But starting with Arizona, and you get a quick turnaround right into Miami. So 2 quick games to start the season for the Bills will be fun and interesting to kind of break down as we get into the schedule timing of the show. When we're able to talk once officially, me and Kevin will go down and see what we think, kind of talk maybe what we think prediction wise in May. That could very easily change. Maybe we'll do something closer in training camp to kind of revisit kind of our predictions to see if we still feel this way. But we'll kind of break down the early schedule before we get into records. We want to wait for the official schedule. But starting with Arizona, I think is fairly confirmed. Kevin, and in Miami, I know is confirmed. So starting with the Arizona game, how are you feeling about Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison Jr.? Not a ton on that team in general. They struggled last year. What do you think about Kyler Murray coming to a raucous Bills stadium for his real first experience against the Bills with fans? The last time they played was COVID season with the Hail Mary.
I think the Cardinals are going to be better than a lot of people expect. I mean, they did finish the season pretty strong, and I think they had a solid draft. I'm blanking on their free agent edition, so I'm gonna look up their depth chart in a minute here. But I think they're going to be solid. But I don't think they're a team that we're going to have to necessarily get over concerned about. Now, we do have to take that with a grain of salt, because as I just mentioned, look what happened in Foxborough last year when you thought it was going to be a cakewalk over the Patriots. So I think it is definitely going to be competitive. The Bills are going to have to show up. But on the surface, I look at that and say this should be a relatively easy win. You get your record to 1-0. You start off nice, easy schedule, 1:00 game at home. You go to Miami. Josh Allen can take care of business like he usually does. And then look at that. You turn around and you're hosting the Jaguars with a 2-0 record. So I know that's best case scenario, and there's a lot of factors that are going to go into it. But I like that. I think that's a very likable first couple of weeks here for the Bills.
Yeah, I think ultimately, I don't think that the starting point of this schedule is overly hard to break down and what it looks like. I mean, look, anytime you finish in first place and you have a first place schedule, you're going to get, roughly, what is it? So you're going to play obviously the toughest teams in your division like you do any year, but that's how the schedule will shake out. So how tough your division is kind of how tough your schedule will be for the most part. Those are 6 games right there, but you're also going to get the division winner. So Baltimore, you're going to get the AFC South winner, Houston, because you play the entire AFC South this year. You're going to get the Chiefs. So then you're going to get the 49ers. And then ultimately, so you're going to play all of the first place teams. So that's going to make your schedule look and feel a lot tough. And then you get the NFC, the week, the 17th game of the season now, which is Detroit, which is another division winner. So now, I mean, essentially speaking, you're going to get plenty of division winners, 5 division winners on your schedule. So that's going to make it feel tough in general, right?
The cost of being a good team in the regular season.
Correct.
But you know what? That's what comes with the territory. If you want to win division titles, then you're going to have to buckle in and say, let's do it again next year, because to be the best, you got to beat the best. So we can't shy down and back off and say, oh man, now we got to play the Chiefs and the Lions and the Ravens. Well, if we're that good, then it shouldn't be that big of a task.
Yeah, so when you finish in first, unfortunately, you do have to play the 5 first place teams. That's just how it works. So no matter while you're good, there's really no way to avoid like a weaker schedule. So like that's why everyone's like, "Oh, this is the toughest year they've ever played." No, this was the toughest year they like. Well, because every year is going to feel like that because you're going to get 5 first place teams: San Francisco, Detroit, Houston. You're going to obviously score Baltimore, and you're going to score KC. So 5 first place teams that, all went fairly far into the playoffs. For the most part, you're going to get all of the, NFC, AFC championship teams. It's just, you're going to be seasoned, ready to go. So that's just how it's going to, then you're obviously going to get the best in your own division. If your division's good, so you're going to get the best in Miami, possibly the Jets this year as well. So you're going to have a couple of tough games in your own division. And then you're going to have to break down that you're going to get, the best of the NFC West. The AFC South is going to be a little bit challenging with Indy. Maybe he's always scrappy with, Anthony Richardson. But that's just ultimately how it breaks down. So as we wait for a few more minutes, Kevin, and we'll break down the schedule a little bit further, let's talk a little bit about the MVS signing for a moment, and then we'll get back into the schedule here in about 5 minutes. But the Bills kind of went out of nowhere, gave him an up to $3.5 million deal with a bunch of incentives. I'll bring those incentives up in the screen in a moment, but tell me about how you feel on paper about replacing Gabe Davis with someone he's been compared to for the majority of his career in MVS. Whether who's better, who's not better, could definitely be debated. Many would probably say Gabe Davis. But what is your opinion on making that move? It's probably, minus Michael Thomas, probably the best remaining free agent option.
I actually think that this was a really great move. Like, it might be an unpopular opinion, but might be the perfect addition for this Bills roster in 2024. And after we talked about it last week, I went back and I listened to our show during work. And if people are wondering what I do for work, it's lawn care and landscaping. So when I was working on a house, I was going back and listening to Going Deep Buffalo because everyone should be doing that, right? I guess that's an opportunity to tell you guys to smash that like button and subscribe to our channel so that we can continue to create this content for you guys. But anyways, I was going back and I was listening and I was like, you know what? Now that I think about it again, we talked at the end of the show. We're trying to put a bow on it, remember? And I was like, who makes the most sense? We talked about the philosophical changes. We talked about Deebo Samuel. And I was like, do you want that vertical deep threat, that field stretcher like a Tyler Lockett? Or do you want a space creator like a Deebo Samuel? And you said Deebo. And I said, I think I'll agree with you, but I don't know. I feel like you could still use that part of your offense. And I didn't really say it on the show because actually during the show, I said, MVS has drop issues. We already moved on from Gabe Davis. But the more I thought about it, I was like, wait a sec. I think I actually do want Marquez Valdes-Scantling on this Bills team. So before I explain my reasoning why, I'll just leave it right there. I think that this is actually a really good pickup for the Buffalo Bills. What do you think?
Yeah, look, like the Bills needed to make another addition. There was definitely a hole on the roster, and he had a market. The Chargers were interested in him. Was probably, we don't know the health of Michael Thomas or Corey Davis, who's also a free agent who retired and then came back, and I don't really know what's going on with Corey Davis. But generally speaking, probably was the best available option that wouldn't have cost an asset. So Deebo Samuel definitely cost assets. I still don't know where they're at in potentially wanting some form of additional player that they may go on that path to acquiring a player. We'll see how that looks, but ultimately he was the best remaining available player. His yards per catch is high. He just comps so much. We're going to bring up some stats now, how he comps to Gabe Davis, but I want to hear why, because you just mentioned why you feel like he could be the best fit. But beside the 6'4", we went over 6'4", 200 plus pound players. Number 5, they're adding to the list. That would fit into that new breed of offense. Is that kind of why you think it would be a good fit? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
So if I could just sum up our conversation from last week, this is why I think Marquez Valdes-Scantling makes so much sense for the 2024 Buffalo Bills. Because the way I see this offense operating, I think that they are going to use a running game to set up the passing game. Because we talked about all those big-bodied receivers that they have acquired between signing Matt Collins and Chase Claypool, drafting Keon Coleman. They still have Justin Shorter. All those guys are 6'4", 220 plus. And then they drafted Ray Davis. We know how they like the 12 personnel packages with Dawson Knox, Dalton Kincaid. They brought back Quentin Morris. And then I know we talked about this a little bit last week, but we could definitely touch on it more. They really built up that offensive line. They double dipped of all positions. We thought they're going to double dip at wide receiver. They double dipped on the offensive line in the draft this year. Not to mention
Triple dipped.
Okay, yeah, triple dipped on the line, double dipped at tackle. And that was a position that we thought they were relatively good at, right? We're like, okay, maybe they'll get a center, but other than that, and they also signed Lael Collins too, and Will Clapp. So this is a team that I think that Joe Brady said, okay, we're going to use our players' strengths to their advantages here. And I think that what they want to do is be a well-balanced offense, and they are going to play complementary football, like Sean McDermott always says. And I think it's careful with how we go about this because, I made this point last week. If you have Josh Allen, you're going to want to throw the ball. But I think the difference was Ken Dorsey wanted to throw the ball way too many times. And yes. I think Brady is trying to say, let's use the pieces that we have on offense and make the defense respect our running game, because we're going to feature James Cook, and then Ray Davis is going to be the thunder to Cook's lightning, and they're going to be that 1-2 punch. So once the defense sucks in and respects that running game, that's when you take the top off. So that's why I was going back and I was thinking the Bills really need a field stretcher, and I think MVS makes perfect sense.
Now, Kevin, let's look at the opinion on what we can look at for his apparently available incentives, all not likely to be earned at this stage. Let's kind of look into what you think is going to happen. Let's play this real quick before the schedule officially drops, and we'll make our predictions there. He had 21 catches for 315 yards and 1 touchdown. Anything less than that, anything more than that would be considered not likely to be earned because he didn't do it last year. So you don't have to account for it on your cap until he hits it. And then next year you'd have to pay him and account for his additional bonuses. So 25 catches, he gets $250K 40, $250K 55, $250K. The Bills very much think he's going to be part of this offense, at least somewhat. So does MVS, or he wouldn't have signed this deal. These aren't crazy escalators. This isn't making an all-pro and go 1,000 yards and 4,000 touchdowns. 350 yards, $250K bonus, 550, 750, as you can see on the screen, each $250K bonuses. Lots of $250K bonuses on the touchdown level, 3 TDs, 5 TDs, 7 TDs, and he gets his 1.125 bonus, assuming vet minimum, so the Bills can keep the cap hit down. What do you ultimately, real quickly, on the MVS front, which one of these does he hit, Kevin? What do you think he does this season? If you were to make a quick prediction on where does he land with his incentives?
I would say probably the first or second on each. Like, I don't think he's going to be more than a wide receiver 4 here. Okay. So I could see him having 25 to 40 catches, 350 to 550 yards, and 3 to 5 touchdowns. I don't think
he's going to hit the first level on all of them.
Yeah, first or second level. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably fair. He'll get another 7. So if he goes for, let's just say in your example, 30 catches for 475 yards and 4 touchdowns. That would each escalate that $750K that they'd have to account for. Basically speaking, instead of doing a void year, the Bills are just going to pay him out in incentives. So that makes perfect sense. And I agree. He's probably somewhere in the 30 to 40 catch range, 400 to 500 yard range, and the 3 to 4 touchdown range, which would be each escalator one. I don't think he's going to hit the second one on any of them. So that's kind of, I think, what you're thinking too, right?
Yes. And not to cut you off, but the schedule is official. So I am working on getting that up on the screen for our next graphic. But yeah, I mean, we can go back to MVS after we talk about the schedule, but I don't think that this is going to be the new Stephon Diggs replacement. This isn't our wide receiver 1. So I think we'll save that for the end of the show. We can take a look at the depth chart, because I think Mike Schopp put it perfectly on WGR the other day. He's like, the Bills have a bunch of wide receivers who would be waiver wire wide receivers who you probably don't want to start, but if you're in a pinch and you say, fine, I'll start Khalil Shakir this week, I'll start, Curtis Samuel, we'll see what he can do. Maybe I can get 10 points out of him.
For sure. All right. Well, we'll await the official schedule to go up. I think we probably had it fairly close. So a second, we get it up on the screen, we'll break down our live reactions. But we already talked about the league schedule in high-level version of the league schedule to kind of break down what we're thinking on that front. So we're looking forward to kind of going through our predictions here now. Once the schedule gets up on the screen, we've already kind of storyboarded what we think will happen in some of the early games, especially. We'll get into what we think is going to break down into the schedule. How it plays out for the Bills will be fun, but generally speaking, the Bills are still out there making moves and they're still looking to make their roster better. And guess what? In 2 weeks, the Bills will have the $10.2 million from Trey White. The Bills can tell me whatever they want about needing in-season money. I'm not buying it. I still think that there's something left. Maybe it isn't at the receiver position. Maybe it is. But I do believe that the $10.2 million will be spent to use on this Bills current roster. So we'll have to wait for a couple more shows to see what they do with that $10.2 million dead cap hit, or a dead cap hit that is going to now count that they've been holding for the last couple of months.
So, I think that there are 2 other positions that they could use that on. We'll have to save that conversation for a later date because I do have the schedule here now. So here is the 2024 Buffalo Bills schedule. They do open up at home against Arizona, 1 o'clock on CBS. Then they go to Miami for Thursday Night Football, September 12th at 8:15. And then they return home for Monday Night Football to host Gabe Davis, Mitch Morse, and the Jacksonville Jaguars on September 23rd, 7:30 on ESPN.
So it was right. The leak did hit. I believe I don't see any major discrepancies. I don't see any discrepancies on what New England, Jets, New England. So it was officially the schedule. Lots of non-1 o'clock games. Looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 1 o'clock games. So, a couple 4s in there. The primetime games. Let's see how many primetime games did we get this year, Kevin?
Trying to count that right now. So Miami's 1, Jacksonville 2, Baltimore 3, Jets 4. Now, to these 405 games, the one in Seattle, that's just a 405 game on Fox. Yeah. But I think the one against Kansas City at 425 on CBS, that's going to be the standalone game. So I think that's technically considered a primetime game.
Yeah, it's close. I'm considering, how about night games? We'll use night games.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4.
San Fran 5. Yep.
I like that. Because I didn't want to overdo it this year. I like the 1 o'clock games, especially earlier in the season. That's why I love opening up against Cardinals at 1 o'clock. And I know that this is a team that deserves a respect, and Josh Allen sells, and people want to see him play. But let's save that for January and hopefully February, because not going to lie, I got a little bit tired last year with all those primetime games.
5's good. Let's look at the let's look at the number of let's look at this late season schedule. Bye week into San Fran, into the Rams, so they're gonna have good weather, into a dome in Detroit, then New England and the Jets, and at New England. So they have a little break there with that weather from the bye through Detroit. They're gonna miss some weather elements, and maybe you're gonna get the best version of Josh Allen in LA and then Detroit. Good times to have both of those games, in my opinion. Do you feel the same?
Yeah, I think that's perfect. I love that bye week. Is Thanksgiving the 27th or 28th? Because they host San Fran Thanksgiving weekend, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I believe that Thanksgiving this year falls on, obviously, Thursday, November 28th.
8th, correct.
Okay, so, that is perfect because we talked about that gauntlet in the beginning, if you want to call it that, between Jacksonville, Baltimore, Houston, the Jets, if Aaron Rodgers is healthy. And this is like the real meat and potatoes here. November 17th against Kansas City, and then they go on the bye, and then San Fran and LA. That is tough right there, but I love having that bye sandwiched in between.
For sure. What is ESPN doing with their games? Why is one at 7:30 and one at 8:15? Is there a dual Monday night game on week 3? Do you know why? I don't get the 7:30 ESPN game. Is it? I'm assuming a dual game.
Maybe I heard that was going to be a thing, but I don't know the reason for it.
Okay, if anyone knows, is that a dual week? We're so focused on the Bills right now. I'm not breaking down the entire NFL. You can tune into ESPN if you care about other team schedules. We can break those down on a different date. But I'd assume with the 7:30 start time, It's got to be 2 games. There's no other reason to have a 7:30 start game, as that's a weird time. I guess some would argue it's better than 8:15, but I mean, Monday Night Football 8:15. That's just what it's been. That's just kind of what I feel the best at as you look at the schedule. But Kevin, it's time on the show. We're going to put our predictions out there, at least our spring predictions. We'll revisit this in September or August, we'll call it. We'll revisit this in 3 months to see if we have any changes, how the roster looks, and we'll kind of do our part 2 right before the season starts in late August. But let's get into it now. So you got
I think I need a little bit more time to digest this, if you don't mind.
Yeah, okay.
Let's talk about these opponents a little bit more first before we put some predictions on. Because I think I answered only half your question before, because you were saying that it gets pretty favorable after the bye week going to those warm weather climates in the dome, right?
Correct.
So again, I answered half of it by saying it is tough because you have Kansas City, San Fran, and LA. But on the plus side, you would like to think that the weather is going to be relatively nice in Buffalo on November 17th and December 1st for that matter, because it shouldn't be that cold or snowy. I mean, anything can happen, but I think that we should be okay. But then when you think that the weather is going to start to turn, you're in LA and then in a dome in Detroit. So then you just have to worry about those 2 games right around Christmas time, New England and the Jets. And then, okay, I'm just realizing that the last one against New England is to be determined. So that could
week 18 always is, though, remember, because you don't know who's fighting for what playoff spot.
True.
So obviously you could get the Sunday night flex game. We had it last year, but generally speaking, they just will play everybody in contention at a certain time. So I think that's why that one's TBD, but it doesn't look like any Saturday game. So none of those Sunday, Saturday flexes, which they've had, historically in their the last couple of years, they've had those Saturday games against a decent team. Week 3 Monday night. Yep. Jets, Jags, Bills, and Washington Bengals. Woof. Okay. I guess they want to appear to Jaden Daniels. I don't know. Okay. Week 3, Jaden Daniels. Okay.
2 LSU quarterbacks.
I mean, I guess there's some stuff to do there. I don't know about that. They put that one later than ours too. Okay. That's definitely a decision that they made. But it is what it is. Okay, so as you look
realizing too, with RJ's comment here, I didn't even realize Houston is a 1:00 kickoff. I thought
probably because of that Thursday game right after in 4 days. So the Bills probably said, if you're going to put me week 2 on the road on 8:15, we're going at 1:00. I would assume.
Wait, say that again. Which game?
What are you talking about? Houston or which specific?
You said the Thursday game.
Oh, okay. So you're talking about Houston. I thought I said Arizona.
Oh, no. I'm saying I thought they would have wanted to put the Bills and Texans in at least the 4:25 slot because of the whole Diggs thing now.
Well, that would be 5 straight though. That would
True.
be 5 straight primetime games. I mean, I agree.
Yeah, you're right.
But that one would be that one would be Arizona at 1:00 is because they play Thursday night. Very shortly after, and then the Houston game at 1:00 would be because they would be 5 in a row. So I'm assuming they're like, all right, CBS wants a good game. CBS bids on games too, guys. I guess in theory that could be CBS 4:15. I mean, sure. But the Bills have a couple CBS 4:15s already. Detroit, Kansas City. Those would be the 2, and they can also put it into the 4:25 slot if they feel like it. But at some point, they want a primetime 1:00 slot game too. They have to have a national game at 1:00 too. We forget that. They will pick one to air nationally for most networks at 1:00 as well. So,
and another year, second year in a row of playing the Jets in New Jersey for Monday Night Football.
Well, they open up against the Rams, right? Who do they open up against? The 49ers? I can't remember who the Jets open up against.
Yeah, they open up against 49ers.
49ers.
The Bills opened up in New York last year for Monday Night Football in the infamous Aaron Rodgers game. And that was the game that
So they open up against Leonard Floyd again, huh?
Yeah. Rodgers against Floyd.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Okay. Well, there you have it. So we'll see. There's different variations of the schedule going forward. So are you comfortable at least talking game to game if you think the Bills will win? I mean, it doesn't need to be anything serious.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of digest a little bit because I didn't even realize, like what RJ said,
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that the Texans is only a 1:00 kickoff. And like you said, they probably didn't want to put the Bills in primetime 5 weeks in a row. So those are like the small nuances that I might miss at first glance.
Yeah, okay. Let's bring it up and just go game to game, and we can talk about it if we need to have a longer talk. That's kind of how we'll spend the majority of our show. Arizona. So week 1, do the Bills come out of that victorious, Kevin? Pretty simple question.
Again, I said this at the outset of the show, and I'll say it again. I think it should be a relatively easy victory. Now, Arizona is going to be a lot better this year, spearheaded by Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr., and I think that they had a pretty solid offseason. So I don't think that you should take this team too lightly because we've seen the Bills play down to their opponents multiple times. But considering the factors and how raucous the crowd is going to be in Orchard Park, I think that that should be a decisive victory for the Bills, bringing them to 1-0 going into Miami for Thursday Night Football the following week.
Agreed. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So we both have them at 1-0 at this stage. Going into Miami on that Thursday night game, the Bills just beat Miami every time. I'm just not worried. I don't think that Dolphins team is overly good. The Bills just seem to play them particularly well. The sun won't be a factor. Hopefully both teams are healthy. There'll be no issues either way with that. They do have that Waddle, Beckham, and Tyreek Hill combination going for them. And obviously their Devin Achane, Jalen Wright, and Raheem Mostert there as well at the running back position. But that defense is just, I mean, they got the ghost of Jordan Poyer. They got just beat up in the defensive end position. I'm not overly nervous about this game, Kevin, but do you think they're able to beat Miami?
I think so. I mean, Josh Allen usually has his way with them. I think they will be tough, especially earlier on in the season because Miami normally fades out towards the end of the year. But I think that the Bills can still get them because even though they're probably going to be playing at a high level, the weather's going to be warm. They're a warm weather September team. I think that because this time, again, this isn't an excuse for the Heat game, but that was a legit factor that the Bills had 20 players go out from either heat stroke or injury. I think that's going to help that the game is at night. So because of that, I'm taking Buffalo.
Yep. Okay. There we have it. Both of us, I agree with you. Both of us will have the Bills 2-0 going into the Jacksonville game. Jacksonville, I'm on record saying it's just never very good. I know they have Trevor Lawrence. I know they have some weapons there, but they've moved on from two of their top 3 receivers last year. They did get Brian Thomas Jr. and Gabe Davis to supplement that issue as well. But I just always think they crumble down the stretch. Doug Peterson is still there, and they went from potentially being a 2 or 3 seed all the way to being out of the playoffs in a quick order. And Trevor Lawrence just has struggled to put it together every year. And that game being in Buffalo on primetime, I got the Bills winning that Monday night game, Kevin.
I think I'm going to take the loss here. Jacksonville is just always a thorn in Buffalo's side. And I don't know what it is. This goes back to even the EJ Manuel days. And every time I think that it should be an easy win or just a win in general, the Bills always let me down. So I think that the first 6 weeks, the Bills are going to be 4-2 going into that Tennessee game on October 20th. So we can discuss how they would potentially get to 4-2. But I see the Bills losing 2 games in the first 6 weeks. And I'm going to throw up a loss here for Jacksonville.
Wow. Against Jacksonville, you mean, right? So, no, or do you mean for Jacksonville? What do you mean? So you're picking the Bills or Jacksonville?
Sorry, I meant I'm picking Jacksonville to win. Bills are going to lose to drop to 2-1.
Gotcha. Okay. Going into Baltimore then on Sunday Night Football. So going off a loss, the Bills don't generally lose off of a loss. I guess talk to me now about Baltimore.
Yeah, and also Sean McDermott always seems to have a great plan for Lamar Jackson. And in the last 2 meetings against the Ravens, one in the playoffs and then one a couple of years ago, Josh Allen always, or maybe I shouldn't say always, but he typically performs well against the Ravens. So I think that would be a bounce back for them. I have the Bills winning against the Ravens to go to 3-1.
I as well. I do have the Bills. It's just the defensive game plan against them. In your scenario, I just think they'd bounce back appropriately, but I do have them 4-0 at this stretch. That game plan they have against Lamar, I was looking forward to have the top chance to play them in the AFC Championship game. And for me, I think maybe the losses will come up soon. But I have them starting 4-0, and just like they get off to every year, a fairly good start. As they reach kind of the tougher end of their schedule right here in this zone. What do you feel about as you go to Houston on that 1:00 game that you brought up earlier?
I think they're going to suffer an emotional letdown here with the whole Diggs drama. And I think, I talked about how crazy the crowd's going to be in Orchard Park for that Arizona game to open up the season.
Okay.
I just have bad vibes again. It's like the AFC South is always a problem for the Bills. And playing in Houston, maybe I have bad memories and bad flashbacks. EJ Manuel. I keep going back to EJ Manuel, but EJ Manuel throwing that pick six right into JJ Watt's gut. Man, the playoff loss. So I just think that there's going to be too many emotions, and Diggs is probably going to put up some big numbers and remind Bills fans why he was our favorite wide receiver. I don't think Diggs is going to, necessarily put up Hall of Fame numbers or anything this season, but I think he will. Maybe I shouldn't say have his way, because Rasul Douglas is probably going to, play relatively well, but I just think there's going to be a lot of factors. And if they are going to drop 2 games in the first 6 weeks, I'll throw up a loss here to Houston.
I just don't know. They got blown out. They just didn't play very well, in my opinion. I don't know if, blowout is the right term to end the season. I'm not sure if their season or if their time is here yet. And I think the Bills emotionally for Josh Allen, you're going to get a Josh Allen game. This is my Josh Allen game time. To prove that he's going to be able to ball with Khalil Shakir, with MVS, with Keon Coleman. This will be the time you really see the grow up. And if any game I have on this schedule the Bills win, it's Houston. I just don't think to me, they're last year Jacksonville. I don't know how well they're going to play. I don't overly like their defense. And we're going to see if how it all comes together for them in their quote unquote go all in phase. So for me, we'll see if we get any regression from CJ Stroud in his second year. I got the Bills in a win in this situation. I just think this will mean too much to Josh Allen. And if the Bills get got, it's probably right against maybe it is better against Jacksonville in your prediction. I just don't think they get got in both. And I don't think it's against Stephon Diggs. I just don't think so.
That is pretty convincing. You're right, because I think Josh Allen's going to be motivated to show why Keon Coleman is going to be the new Diggs and all of the new pieces, like you said, MVS. So, I could see that, especially because McDermott always has a good plan for those younger quarterbacks. So, again, if I'm taking the Bills with the 4-2 record going into week 7, then I could easily see the Bills winning against Houston, but then losing to the Jets. Because speaking of a team that they always have struggles with, it's always true. So maybe it's more realistic that they're riding high after a couple big victories, and then they have the letdown in New York against the Jets, especially if Rodgers is healthy. So, it's so early. We're just looking at May 15th.
We're having some fun. Yeah, we're having some fun.
If we clip this up and people are going to say, oh, how could you see Stephon Diggs going off against the Bills? Like, look, we're just spitballing here. But I'm going to take a loss in Houston, but then a win in New York.
Okay. I'm taking the revert. I think they beat Houston. There's no way, but then I think that's going to lead to an emotional letdown against the Jets in their house of horrors in the Meadowlands. I didn't believe it last year. Zach Wilson beat them. They had every opportunity after an emotional loss to Aaron Rodgers to take care of business. And they just conversely to the Houston scenario I've just talked about, it's just they go down there with Robert Saleh in that stadium and they just find a way to not get it done for whatever multitude of reasons every time. I'm taking a loss just because they're not going to win. They're not going to go 6-0 in the division. I do have a loss in the Meadowlands against the Jets. And for me, that would be my first loss, 5-1. So do you have them winning that then now, right? So you have them coming off of a Houston loss into that win?
Yeah, I guess so. And I think it could be interchangeable. I have the Bills at 4-2. You have them at 5-1. So I guess that
Correct.
takes us to October 20th against Tennessee. I think that should be another game like Arizona where it's not going to be a cakewalk, but if the Bills play like they should, it should be probably a 2-touchdown win.
Agreed. As much as I don't, and then I have them coming off of a loss, which they generally still play very well in. I think McDermott's only lost a couple times off of a loss in his career. And it just against, to me at home against a Tennessee team, you You already have them losing twice to AFC South teams. So I agree. I just don't think that Tennessee's maybe one of the worst teams in the league. We'll see what Will Levis looks like. J.C. Latham, they're in first round draft choice. They did get Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, and Tyler Boyd. So they do kind of have that revamped, older receiving core. I just, no Derrick Henry. I don't know, Kevin. I just don't think there's enough there. Always revolves around their defense, but Brian Callahan, we'll see what his offense looks like if they can get it done now, because it's always been a defensive team, but that may change with Brian Callahan at the helm, who's always been wildly successful for Joey Burrow. So I got a W as well. So heading into Seattle, at Seattle, Kevin, how you feeling going all the way out to Seattle for that game?
I think that'll be a tough matchup, but considering it's early in the year, I think I like the Bills' chances here because I don't know what their quarterback situation is between Geno Smith and Sam Howell. And I think that they're in that middle tier where they're not a Super Bowl contender, but they're not rebuilding. They're just kind of there. So I think that McDermott's defense can take advantage of that. And I could see a game where maybe the offense isn't clicking, but it could be one of those low scoring games and the Bills get out of there with the victory to go to 7-2. Or is it 6-2? Yeah, that would be 6-2.
Yeah, that would be 6-2 in your scenario. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, if you look at the way that I just don't see enough firepower on Seattle. But I think this is the mid-season lull that we always seem to see around this team in this late October, early November. I'm taking Seattle in Seattle against the Bills just because maybe a Kenneth Walker game. This may be one of those versions. The offense isn't clicking like you just mentioned, and there's a turnover and they control the clock. I just think going on the road to Seattle, has never been favorable. I know it doesn't matter. This history just is goofy. And, you got Mike McDonald there now. And there's not a ton there, but will DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smithing, Jigba. There is in Kenneth Walker. There is enough there. If it's Geno Smith and Sammy Howell, like Little Howie, I don't know. That quarterback play doesn't scare me, but neither does Zach Wilson. But I think this will be one of my road losses of the season to a team that they don't play too often, going all the way out there. And they're also thinking about a huge game against Miami the next week, Kevin. So I have them getting sleeping on this one, and losing. So now we both have the same record as you go into the Miami game.
Okay, yeah. So that being said, I don't see them losing to Miami. So I'm going to bring them to 7-2, especially at home. Yeah, give me Buffalo here.
I guess if there's any chance it's that Thursday night game and their place that they'd have a shot at it. But yeah, I don't. Yeah, I'm giving me the Bills. I don't even need to talk about that anymore. I just don't think they play well in Buffalo. Going into Indy though, what are you thinking about this Anthony Richardson led team where Indy played very well last year, but that was due to their backup quarterback play.
You talked about the letdown or the lull that they normally have in the beginning of the season or the middle of the season, I should say. I think this is where they're going to hit that. And this is going to bring them to that spot where it's like, oh man, look at this gauntlet. You have Kansas City and San Fran coming up. How'd you lose to Indy? And it's like, okay, chill. We're 7-3 still. And we regular season that remains to be true this year, but I'm going to give them a loss to Indy. I just see them putting up a nothing, not a nothing burger. They're not going to get shut out, but I just see them being flat.
So in their 10th game of the year, you have them 7-3. You know what's funny, Kevin? This is one. I mean, we've agreed on most. I guess we had a couple differences. I have them losing to Indy here too. They struggle there. However, I will say that in the dome, this could be one of those games that works out for them. I mean, you're going to get primetime Josh in terms of like those elements that he likes to play in. So it doesn't really work but other than just straight feeling like this could be the third loss of the year. Jonathan Taylor always seems to play well. Anthony Richardson, I think, takes the next step. He's going to prove, and they have Joe Flacco behind him anyways, who's more than capable after what he proved he could do last year. That offensive line is going to keep him upright. And that receiving core, Michael Pittman Jr., Adonai Mitchell, and Josh Downs, I think he'll get a 1 week appearance on the Bills. I got Indy as well. I think that's a prime spot going into Kansas City in the bye week for a letdown. So I have them as 7-3 going into the home game rematch against Kansas City.
Yep, and this one is a toss-up because obviously we know what the Chiefs can do, but I'm going to look at that and say they're coming off of that letdown in Indy, and they're going to respond by beating Kansas City at home, and they're going to kind of make up for what happened in the playoffs. And by kind of, I mean, they're going to show that they could do it just for the playoffs to come around again. And then look, like, I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, but I don't know if I see the Bills getting past the Chiefs again this year. So I feel like it's
Yeah.
another one of those years where they're going to beat them in the regular season and we're going to feel great. And it's like, oh, wow, we finally beat the Chiefs here. We got them at home. We're 8-3 going into the bye. And we'll get to the rest of the schedule, obviously, coming up. But if they meet in the playoffs again, I don't like my chances. I'm scarred from the Chiefs. And especially if the Bills lost as much as they did, this is a youth movement. I don't know if this is a year that you're going to get past the Chiefs in January. But I will have them getting past them in November.
Okay. I think they always win in the regular season. They've won it for multiple years in a row. I think they win at home here as well. I think they'll come with a full roster. The Chiefs have lost a lot of players too. We just don't talk about because they have Mahomes and Andy Reid and they don't lose in the playoffs. But on a roster standpoint, I think they lost a lot of EPA. I mean, their defense is mangled. Like they have players that are hurt that were coming off of injury at the end of the year. They lost like a lot of their secondary, including L'Jarius Sneed. Obviously, they lost Mike Edwards to the Bills, but like they have Trent McDuffie still, who's obviously very good, but Jalen Watson and Joshua Williams. When the Chiefs don't have good cornerback play, they have historically struggled. We'll see how that looks. They've lost Willie Gay. Nick Bolton and Chenal are pretty good, which were tranquil, but their depth took a hit. I don't think their defensive line beside Chris Jones is anything overly scary. They're always, searching for that next offensive lineman. And will Rashee Rice play this year at all? Half the year? What may it be? I got the Bills winning this one going into their bye week as well, 8-3 and off to a feeling like a pretty good start. So we're going to break down the rest of this schedule. But as always, please smash the like button for us. And thank you to our show sponsors, the Summit Center, as well as Dave Dengler and Larson-Timko. We really appreciate all of our show sponsors as well. And smash those 5-star ratings on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And we really appreciate everyone being here to listen. But coming into the bye, pretty good week to have a bye, right? Right after the emotional KC game. So not to have a letdown.
I think that is perfect. So they get the bye Sunday, November 24th, right before Thanksgiving, and it is going to be a grind all the way from July until November 24th. So that gives them a chance to heal up and reset for that thick part of the schedule going into the playoffs. And we know that the Bills normally respond pretty well coming out of the bye. Isn't Sean McDermott undefeated after the bye?
He is.
So I think because of that, I was thinking, I was like, man, I don't know if the Bills, if they have the roster to be 9-3, but I do like the Bills when they're underdogs. And I think that they play better when they're underdogs. And McDermott's good coming out of the bye. So I'm going to have them beating San Fran to go to 9-3.
Will San Francisco keep up their play with their roster? Will Christian McCaffrey be healthy? What will Brock Purdy look like? What will happen with Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, or will they roll with Jacob Cowing and conspicuously Ricky Pearsall, two players they took double dipped at the receiver position? How will that end up breaking down? And obviously they're always pretty good defensive team coming on the road to Buffalo on Sunday night, which could be very, very bad out. I got the Bills as well coming off of a bye, and the Bills are in super good position going to the Rams. But Kevin, do they got in LA, or is it going to get basically great weather Josh Allen as you go to the Rams game?
Yeah, this is tough. I think there's definitely going to be a loss in here. Like, I don't know if the Bills are going to be 10-3, 11-3. I don't know if they're going to keep stacking W's. So I think there's a loss definitely coming in here. So I would say they can beat the Rams, but I have a feeling, Detroit's really good. So I could see a loss to Detroit, but a win against the Rams. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's where I got it. I got them going to beat the Rams as well, going into Detroit. And I don't know, what do we have? The Vaughn injury last year. They almost got us on Thanksgiving with a much worse roster. The Rams are going to be vying. This is going to remind me of that Eagles loss last year by the Bills. I do have them losing to Detroit the last week. I think that team's ticking on all cylinders. Potentially always at this stage of the game may always be a Super Bowl matchup. But Amon-Ra St. Brown, will Jamison Williams, what will he look like? They've played super well football with Sam Laporta and the new contract for Jared Goff. I just think on the road, I think that they may put together a good enough game plan to beat the Bills going into that New England stretch. So New England on the 22nd at home. will Drake may be playing? How does this whole thing finish for us?
So what do we have them at right now? Are we both at 10-3 or
Yes.
10-4?
10-4. 10-4.
Okay, so we're both on 10-4. I think there's definitely going to be one more loss. Now, here's the thing,
Okay.
though.
I
The
agree.
Bills always finish strong. So I see it both ways where they could have a letdown against the stingy Patriots or the Jets, right? But they always finish strong. So maybe that goes back to your previous point that they got in Seattle. Maybe that could be their lull. Like they lose.
And Detroit. And Detroit.
Yeah, but I'm talking about like that mid-season lull
yeah.
where I could see them losing 2 out of 3. They lose to Seattle, bounce back, beat Miami, but then they lose to Indy. So maybe that 5th loss actually comes from the Seahawks. But for the sake of this, because I don't see the Bills winning more than 12 games this year, I'm going to give them a loss to, we'll say, the Jets. So I have them beating New England twice and losing to the Jets to finish 12-5. And again, you can interchange those. Maybe you throw a loss earlier in the season and a couple more wins later in the season. But I think this is probably a win team this year.
I mean, you're not wrong by assuming that. I don't think they get swept by the Jets, though. I guess you didn't have them getting swept by the Jets. In my prediction, I would have. So I have them beating the Jets. I'm thinking that maybe potentially that end of the year game against New England doesn't matter, and that could be in New England. That could be the one where they take an L in. But I agree with you. I think they end up 5 losses. The more I look at the schedule, the more I'm like, I don't know. People are saying I don't like the schedule. I don't really mind it. I thought last year's was harder. If I'm really thinking about it, like I don't mind that finish. Like, yes, that Detroit game is hard. But after the bye, like I'm not overly that nervous. I think there is a 1 loss in there, definitely. Like, I guess there could be a second in there, but going 4-2 would be fine with me anyways. I'm already giving him Kevin. I'm already giving a loss to the Jets. I'm already giving him a loss for my prediction in Seattle. I'm already giving him a loss to Indy. And Detroit. Like, it's not like we're picking them to go undefeated. So I have them winning these 3 games. I have them winning out in my score prediction, and I didn't know that I would, but I have them going 13-4. But there's very likely that they could drop one of these games, and maybe it's one of those New England games like they did last year. But I got them ultimately getting to the 13-4 mark just because the schedule doesn't, and I'm giving them losses. I guess there's another, they maybe lose to Baltimore in there. I don't really. I already have them splitting with the Jets. I don't really. Some people say they're not going to lose to Indy. Like, yeah, I mean, I'm not that nervous about this guy. I just think that they are better. I think the Brady offense was good. He's got his pieces now. We'll see if they make one final addition somewhere on the roster. I just don't think whatever this in-season money of $5 million they're going to. I just think that they spend for $3 to $5 million of this minimum to add to a final piece to the roster, Kevin. So, I just think that they go 13-4. That's what I see. I've had some losses in there that I'm not sure they even lose. Maybe swap them out with some wins that I had. I could see yours too. They could drop one of those. I just don't know how much different from 12-5 to 13-5. I just don't see under 12-5.
Yeah, I mean, it could happen. I don't see them above 12-5. That's the thing. So I think that's why I'm going to stay right in the middle and say this could be a 12-win team. Because what was their final record last year? Was it 11-6, right?
Yes. Right after going into the playoffs, correct.
Yeah, because they really had to dig themselves out of that hole. So they only finished with 11 wins. So I think considering that Joe Brady was 6-1 when he took over as offensive coordinator, and to your point, they got a lot of pieces that suit his play calling, I think that gives the Bills that boost. But at the same time, this is a younger team. So I don't know if they can just steamroll these teams, and we're looking at a 13-14 win team. So that's why I'm just going to stay right in the middle and say I think that a 12-5 record is a healthy prediction.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you. So with that being said, getting on to an hour of the show, we talked about talking about a little bit about MVS and what we think about the MVS signing, what the Bills are going to do with their $10.2 million. I don't actually know. Do you think they're going to do anything with that? What's your prediction? I don't think. Have you said
with the Trey White money?
Yes.
Well, I think that they are pretty much done at wide receiver, because I think that if they were going to do something big or substantial, they would have done it already. So I think the MVS signing kind of shows that. Now I know they could, but aren't they getting close? If not, like they already have too many players on the roster because they can roster what 90 going into camp.
Yeah, but you would just cut a UDFA.
True.
It's not like they're cutting a primetime player. I mean, you would cut, doesn't really
Brian Thompson or something.
Yeah, like sure, it could be Brian Thompson, it could be Xavier Johnson, Lawrence Keys, David Agawagbu from defensive end. It could be any. It could be any of those, Kevin. So I don't think that'll matter. I just don't see them carrying that. They have a lot of young players. Kansas City played super well with their young core 2 years ago. The Rams did. That roster was terrible, and they hit on a bunch of draft picks. I thought the Bills. We talked about live on the show. I thought the Bills did super well on day 3 this year. Especially. I mean, really. I mean, you could say the entire draft, but specifically with getting Dwayne Carter late in the 3rd into. You're talking about getting a potential running back 2 in Ray Davis. Now you're talking about Javon Solomon and Olafosio being really pivotal depth players on this roster. Did they land Cedric Van Pran Granger potentially to start in the 5th round, at least at some point in his career? UDFA Frank Gore Jr., could he beat out Ty Johnson and Darrington Evans? A lot of people think it could happen. Daquan Hardy, a really decent looking returner. That could come to play definitely as a backup nickelback to Taron Johnson. So that's always been an issue. The Bills don't have a backup if Taron goes down. And then you've mentioned already on the show the offensive line upgrades, the 3 offensive rookies that they had. I just think there's a lot of talent on the rookie end, and that's not even talking about Keon Coleman or Cole Bishop. So they're 2nd round picks. So ultimately, and those are basically speaking 2 starters. So I think they have a chance to really do this draft well. And yes, maybe some of those players, one might come in the offensive line position, one might come in defensive line position, one might come at linebacker. Like, it does have the makings to be a pretty good young roster, right?
Yeah. Now, was this all wrapped into what are they going to do with that extra 10.2 from Trey?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, ultimately, how are they going to spend that 10.2 from Trey? And if this young roster can actually be a tick better, based on my prediction, even yours, you have them game better, I have them 2 games better than last, and then kind of summing it up. Are they going to be better than next year or this year than last year?
Yeah. I mean, I guess based on our predictions that we just laid out, they're going to be 1 game better at 12-5. Now, to answer your original question, because that's where we got off a little bit, because I said that I think they're done at wide receiver. So that being said, I think that they could go after an edge rusher like a Leonard Floyd post June 1st. And a position that is kind of getting lost in the cards here is a boundary corner, because the Bills essentially have to replace Trey White and Dane Jackson. And they didn't really do either. Now, you could say that Trey White has already been replaced with Russell Douglas, but the way that the roster was prior to Trey getting cut, you had Trey and Dane, who was that pending free agent.
Yep.
And they didn't really do anything. You mentioned Hardy, but is that slot corner? And what are we looking at now?
Slot is covered.
Yeah, Jamarcus Ingram. God forbid if Russell Douglas and Benford go down, are we looking at Kyrie Elam and Jamarcus Ingram again? So I think
we would be. Yep.
I think we got to see something here. So I could see the Bills signing a corner and or an edge rusher after June 1st.
I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, the difference is I think they're ready for Kyrie Elam with the coaching changes and the style of defense that may change. They're ready for Kyrie Elam to step in to be that main boundary backup. But yes, so the 4th boundary corner could technically be open, but you already have 3 boundaries and then 2 slots. So we're essentially talking about whether you want to call it the 5th or the 6th corner, depending on how you look at corner room. We are talking about a position that, by all accounts, wouldn't be someone that could be out Kyrie Elam, but there are definitely some boundary corners available, and we'll see how training camp plays out. But the Bills could definitely use that motion. I think the defensive end was in play, Kevin. I really do. But they went out and got Dwayne Smoot, a guy that right after the draft, who's definitely making the roster based on his contract, really good looking backup. They've also had Casey Tuill on the roster as well. And then Javon Solomon, to my main point, could be a really good rotational piece. So between those 3, I don't really know if there's room for another. And then obviously adding Dwayne Carter, having Austin Johnson and Deshaun Williams, I don't know that there's room for another defensive lineman on this roster. it may have already came in the form of Dwayne Smoot.
Yeah, it's a good point. I kind of forgot about Smoot, to be honest. And to Spin's point here, I don't agree with this because he says that we're pretty much set at corner. I don't think so because this team loves depth and competition. And if you think that we're set with Jamarcus Ingram not competing against anyone else for that last boundary position, I don't think so because I mean they get competition for just about every single position. I mean, look at they double dipped at offensive tackle when we thought they were set, and then they draft two of them. So they sign La'el Collins, then they draft two more. I don't think that they have faith in Jamarcus Ingram, but if they're gonna leave any position alone, I highly doubt it would be that spot and just put that much confidence in Ingram.
There you have it. I agree with you. I don't think that D end has any openings. What Smoot was the kind of the nail in that. They have Casey Toohill competing and Javon Solomon, a guy they really like. I just don't think that there's any. Oh, and they obviously that's not including Kingsley Jonathan that they obviously rostered all last year. So I just don't think that there's any rotational openings. Obviously behind the two starters, and then whatever you want to consider AJ Epinesa. So they really have three starting defensive ends, and then those rotational guys we just mentioned. So defensive end, I'll agree. I don't know there's a roster spot there. Defensive tackle, they seem like they have covered too. There isn't one really out there anyways. But boundary corner could be one they could entertain. But I think they're just going to give the job and all of the responsibilities to basically speaking corner 3/4, however you want, boundary corner 3, total corner 4 to Kaiir Elam. And I think that ultimately Hardy then steps in the special teamer in the 5th corner role. And they do have a lot of depth guys they like. So I can see both sides of the corner argument for sure on what somebody would think. But you're right. I think that ultimately at a boundary corner, it's not crazy to assume that they go out and get somebody that could help there. I think their O-line is set. It isn't wild to assume they could do something at running back, but there isn't any running back there. So they may roll with, they might go with their 2 rookies and Ty Johnson to back up James Cook. So they could go with Frank Gore Jr. And Ty Johnson really there in those backup reserve spots, to put some pressure on Ray Davis. I mean, I think it's Ray Davis's job personally, but he was kind of their handpicked running back too. So I don't know. Maybe there isn't a spot on this roster for another player. I mean, I guess you're right. It may be boundary if there was, and still until I think it's super good, it's still going to be boundary receiver too.
Now, Tommy asks, what about Justin Simmons? Now, I think I'm out on Simmons. I think the Bills are too. I mean, Cole Bishop is going to be the next Jordan Poyer, if not Micah Hyde. Speaking of Micah Hyde, we don't even know if he's done yet. I mean, he still might come back. I could see him in a reduced role. Maybe we'll get the announcement at his softball event on Sunday. Can you imagine if he walks out there and he's like, I'm coming back?
I mean, I don't know how likely that is, but I wouldn't count it out. I think it's very likely that something like that could happen. The Bills know that, but safety would then be fairly loaded. So basically you'd be returning him. You'd be Cole Bishop and you'd be returning everybody but Poyer, and then Poyer for Cole Bishop swap. And then you'd have obviously Mike Edwards. So Mike Edwards and Cole Bishop to the room and out goes Poyer, but everything else would be the same. I mean, it's not crazy. And then finally, I think we can say that they upgraded safety this offseason, right?
That's if Micah Hyde returns?
Yes. If Micah Hyde returns, the only difference is Poyer out, Bishop and Mike Edwards in.
Yeah. So, I mean, Justin Simmons, that's highly unlikely now, right?
I mean...
I don't see a route for him to... Obviously, he would make the roster because of his talent, but, I don't see a route for him to even get targeted by the Bills because I feel like they would have done that already. I think Mike Edwards is starting free safety, and then it'll probably start out as Taylor Rapp, and then whenever Cole Bishop is ready, he'll be the starting strong safety.
And so have plans for all three of them like they did. Mike Edwards has been used to being in that third safety role, kind of got paid as that third safety. No, I just don't see them. And Justin Simmons plays for Jordan or for Micah Hyde money, maybe $2 million. Sure. But I think that they already know that if Micah Hyde's playing, he's coming back to Buffalo. And maybe the reason why Simmons doesn't make sense is because they know that their vet choice may be Micah Hyde.
I just feel like Simmons is going to want too much money too. He's one of those guys where he's out on the market and he's going to say, okay, I'm going to find a team who didn't necessarily fill all their needs post free agency, post draft, and now we're looking at, that extra money coming in on June 1st. Show me the money. Who wants me?
Absolutely. So we'll have to track that in more with the newfound money. So we won't be able to talk about it really in 2 weeks because there'll still be the 29th. But in 3 weeks from today will be June 5th. And by then we will know more about what the Bills may do with some of this money. And there's still definitely talks that DB, sure. They didn't do a ton of DB. I guess they got Bishop and Hardy, but they didn't do anything in the boundary. So that's obviously in free agency or in the draft. So that's obviously up there. They could obviously always improve safety. They lost Poyer and Hyde, so they could continue to add to that room. They could always do something, continue to do some with boundary receiver. And sure, D-line's always in the cards, even though I think they're fairly stockpiled for what they'd assume a room of vets and rookies in both of those rooms, getting already Carter and Solomon, 2 guys that they got in the middle rounds to come in and be rotational players. And then OTAs starting here soon. So we'll have a lot of OTAs to talk about in the future weeks and more. So Kevin, give us some final thoughts on the schedule, final wrap-up thoughts on the roster. What do you got for us?
Well, we kind of talked about the wide receiver room earlier in the show. So let's talk about that depth chart first, and then we'll wrap up our final thoughts with the schedule. So with the Marquez Valdes-Scantling signing, by the way, did you hear that he said it is Marquez, not Marquez?
I did hear that.
So we're going to have to get, because I think I was calling him Marquez. So it's Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Yep. By the way, he's played with Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, and now Josh Allen. Talk about a very, very lucky career.
Must be nice, right?
Like you're thinking, okay, this guy must be really good, right? And at most, is he a wide receiver 4? I mean, that's pretty good luck to be able to play with 3 probably Hall of Fame quarterbacks, at least 2. I mean, Josh is going to be a Hall of Fame, right? Should we start this discussion? But 3 top-tier quarterbacks, and he's been at most a mid-tier wide receiver who fulfills a role. I mean, that's pretty good fortune.
I agree with you. I mean, ultimately, I think that depth chart is in pretty good shape. I just broke down on the free agencies. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, it maybe is the final piece there. Maybe Dwayne Smoot is the final piece there. Maybe Cole Bishop's the final piece at safety with Dwayne Carter and Javon Solomon there too. Maybe it is just boundary corner that may be the only potential opening. And maybe they still think that safety, that there's always room because of the youth and the running back position. Everyone there is fairly young. So that's not crazy to me. But I think that, with OTAs coming up, I think the Bills are going to take a good look at this roster and then determine how they want to spend their June 1st money.
Do you see a wide receiver 1 on the Bills right now? Because I don't think that there's a clear-cut wide receiver. Like, I think it's just going to be a committee, and they're fine with having Curtis Samuel, Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir. And I don't know if anyone else is a lock right now. Maybe Mac Hollins, MVS. But I feel like it's just a bunch of solid players that are going to fill the Diggs and Davis role. Like before, obviously, Diggs was a top 5, top 10 receiver. We're not getting that. I don't think one is walking in the door on June 1st. So I think this is going to be a wide receiver by committee approach. But if you had to form a depth chart, who's wide receiver 1 right now? Is it Coleman? I don't think he starts as wide receiver 1, right? Is Curtis Samuel the one?
I think
actually this is good right here.
I don't think
it's Kincaid. I agree with that.
I don't think he's a receiver 1. No, he's not a receiver. He's a tight end. He plays in line. He's going to be out of the game at points. With they'll play Knox more. Do you mean we'll lead the team in targets?
Yes.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, no, I don't think didn't we make that last week? I do not believe so that he is going to be targets 1 on the Bills. I think he finishes 2. Yep.
Who's 1 then?
In targets?
Yeah.
I think it's be Curtis Samuel.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So you would have Curtis Samuel, and then obviously.
But to answer your question, you asked, I don't think they have a receiver 1. So that's why until they kick off against Arizona, I do not believe that the receiver 1's on the roster. So until it's not, until one of these is, I'm going to think that there's a way around the $10.2 million, and the Bills are going to make it abundantly clear when they make a move for Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. Maybe it's a lesser player, Cortland Sutton or less. But they will make an argument of how that was to come to fruition after they see these guys to drop the OTAs May 20th and 21st and 23rd, the 28th through 30th as well. So with all that, kind of summed up, the Bills will have a very good look at some of their roster players as they go into June 3rd and 4th OTAs too. So when that June 1st money comes around, they may know right then and there if they do need to make that move for a true, to your question, to a true receiver one.
So you think they could still do that?
I think it's possible. Yeah.
Because I'm out on it now. Like, I think this is what we're looking
at. MVS took you out of that?
Yeah, MVS and Chase Claypool. Who would have thought? But I don't know. I just think that, okay, so we'll wrap up with this because I already made this point, but then we had to get to the schedule. So I didn't get to ask your thoughts. So I'll give the quick version here. So this is how I see the Bills offense. They're going to use a running game to set up the passing game, right? You have James Cook as a feature back with Ray Davis and Ty Johnson, for that matter, maybe Frank Gore Jr. to complement James Cook. You have 12 personnel. You built up the offensive line, and you have a bunch of big-bodied wide receivers who can not only make the tough contested catch and get yards after the catch, but they can also help pave the way for the running game as well. And that is Keon Coleman, probably at the height of that, like quintessentially Keon Coleman. And then now with Chase Claypool, Mac Hollins, we'll see what happens with Justin Shorter, who is a fan favorite. And then you also have the guys like Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, KJ Hamler, and Andy Isabella, who can work underneath. They can create that space. So I think this is going to be a well-balanced approach. And the one missing piece was that vertical deep threat, the field stretcher, and that is Marquez Valdes-Scantling. So I think that based on what Joe Brady wants to do with this offense, this roster, specifically the wide receiver room, is essentially set right now. So I guess two questions here. Do you agree with that assessment? And part two, do you still think that they could use another one of those groups out of those different types of wide receivers?
I think they've obviously done a great job of getting that 6'4", trying to find that speed guy, trying to figure out who they were going to replace Gabe Davis with, trying to find maybe that, they've also replaced the Hardy role with Curtis Samuel. Obviously, they have Shakir in there too to dominate the slot. I still think that there is room for a move player, a guy that can bounce in, outside, inside, in the backfield. I think just stylistically, like a Deebo Samuel style of player with the rack ability, one of the best racks in the league. 19 rushing touchdowns in his career. Joe Brady would love to have a player like that, kind of like how he would want to have schemed up wasn't his player, like how he would want to screen up a Hardy last year. I just think that kind of player makes the most sense. I don't know that there's room for like a Cortland Sutton. I don't know that that's kind of the stylistic player they'd be looking for. But then if they did go Cortland Sutton, that would pretty much mean that like they don't see anything in Claypool. They don't really see much. Like I don't know what they would see in MVS. I just think that there's room for a style player in the form of Deebo Samuel, as we talked about last week. So that's kind of that what I think would be what they'd be looking for, someone that can play all the different positions on the receiving core. And there's just no receiver one, and Deebo Samuel is a receiver one to me. So we'll see how that all plays out. But until they don't spend that $10.2 million, no one's going to convince me that they aren't. And I'm not sure. Maybe it is boundary corner. I'm just not sure where. Maybe it's at safety. I'm just not sure where else they'd spend that money. They could roll it over, but then they wouldn't have post June 1st Trey White. They would have just they wouldn't have rolled dead money into next year either. They would have just taken the hit this year and had a completely free and clear from Trey White next year where they're taking some dead money. So it doesn't make sense to free up that kind of money this year. They would have saved at least a little bit on Trey already, to the point where they could have operated with in-season cap money with just the cap savings this year. But they wanted to save like another $5 extra and basically push it into next year, like essentially like a void year is how they caught Trey White. So I don't know why they're making a void year if they're not going to use that money. So we'll see. We'll see what happens in 3 weeks after these OTAs that we break down. Maybe we'll have a little bit more insight on that 3 weeks from tonight.
Do you have to get going, or do you want to take one last look at the schedule here?
What about the schedule? What are you thinking?
Just final thoughts. I mean,
I got a few minutes for like a minute or two for final thoughts. Sure.
Okay.
Of course.
Okay. I just wasn't sure about the timing situation. So one last look at the 2024 Bills schedule here. and, comments are welcome as well. So I guess just to sum up our thoughts, I think that the first 2 weeks are going to be a lot of fun and pretty favorable, and it should be 2 wins for the Bills, but then
Yep.
it's going to be a tough part hosting Gabe Davis and Mitch Morse for Monday Night Football, and Trevor Lawrence, by the way. I keep talking about Gabe and Mitch, but Trevor Lawrence is probably going to have a pretty good season, as well as, Brian Thomas, too. I think maybe you mentioned him, but he was my guy in the draft, and now he comes to Buffalo as well. And then you have to turn around, go to Baltimore for Sunday Night Football, and then you have the emotions with the Houston matchup and Stephon Diggs, and then you go to the Jets. That is like there are 2 meaty parts of the schedule. Those 4 weeks right there, from Jacksonville to the Jets, and then from Kansas City to Detroit. Like, that is going to pretty much be the telling point of the Bills season, I think. Like, those are the 2 meat and potatoes right there.
There you have it. Well, I think you're on point with that breakdown of how that all kind of sections off. I'd argue maybe even starting Miami, starting that first stretch. But yes, definitely as Jacksonville starts off, I definitely agree with how that all transpires. Well, thanks for everybody for being here for our schedule release show. We really appreciate it from talk about MVS to kind of breaking down our initial schedule leak into the real schedule and talking about where the Bills may be willing to spend that $10.2 million if they are willing to spend it. I think they still are. But we'll bring that to you as it unfolds over the next couple of weeks, and OTAs. So we'll have some OTAs to talk about on Wednesdays right here on the Built in Buffalo Podcast Network. And thank you, as always, to our show sponsors, the Summit Center and Larson-Timko. Thank you guys so much for sticking with us for an hour and 15 minutes on this live reaction show. We'll be back at you with more next week on our thoughts of the roster breakdown and more, because we'll definitely have some things to talk about, maybe some positions that we want to upgrade, maybe what the Bills could be looking at with that $10.2 million in further discussion. But from Kevin, that's Kevin. We really look forward to being here with you guys Wednesday nights, right here, live on YouTube, Facebook, and on Twitter. Thank you all so much. We'll see you soon, and we'll see how this Bills schedule prediction actually shakes out when we evaluate it in September.
Go Bills.